Welcome to the Puzzle People Pod. I'm here today with my producer and co-host Ben, as well as Heather and Becca of the JPA. For those who don't know, the USA Jigsaw Puzzle Association organizes the National Speed Puzzling Tournament that happens biannually. Our conversation today is for all those listening who are speed puzzle curious or have thought about volunteering at an event. Welcome, Heather and Becca.
Thanks for having us.
So I have been doing a puzzle just because I think it makes having these sorts of conversations easier. And today I am doing this Lots of Cats puzzle from Crocodile Creek. So if you see me moving about, that's what I'm up to. Are you guys also going to puzzle?
I'm working on Gardener's Palette by Ravensburger. I'm doing lots of world trading right now, so it's a very Ravensburger heavy household. A lot of blue dust.
And I just got a traveling puzzle, one of our programs through USA JPA. So I'm working on a Stumpcraft wooden puzzle that looks like this.
We'll get some photos of each of the puzzles we're doing and we'll put them on our Instagram post so you can see what we're all working on. So let's start off. Let's just talk a little bit about you guys. What is the JPA and how many of you all are there?
Well, the Jigsaw Puzzle Association was created in 2020 by a few puzzle enthusiasts who thought we needed to build more of a community of puzzlers. And I think they've done a great job. Recently, Becca and I have joined the board just in June, but we have been volunteering with them for a while now. We have about 2,000 members in the US right now. And then we've got lots of different varieties. We have just like regular average puzzlers, and then we have a collection of speed puzzlers within our group too. So
how did you guys find the JPA? Because for Ben and I, this all sort of happened somewhat through Val because obviously we're filmmakers and Val's partner Mike is a filmmaker, and we met him at the Fargo Film Festival. We got to chatting, and I had been researching speed puzzling, so I saw Wicker Kittens, which he had then worked on, and I saw his name, and I was like, you need to tell me all about this and what you know. And so he kind of got us in touch with you all, but I'm curious, how did you all find the JPA and these events?
I think a lot of us have a story of finding an event or a person who then told us about it, and that was what happened with me. I stumbled into a puzzle competition at a wine bar in a beach town near me, and I said, oh, I like wine and I like puzzles. And I did very well in that contest and won, and a bunch of people came over to my table afterward and said, are you on a team? And I said, what?
I needed to snag you.
How about you, Heather?
I can't remember the first time it came up, but I live in Minnesota, and Minnesota is a big puzzling state already because we have the St. Paul Winter Carnival, and we have a Duluth competition. So I think my first speed puzzling competition was in Duluth. Just a friend and I were like, let's go to Duluth. This will be fun. And Val was there, and because she runs the Duluth competition. So probably at that point, I heard about that and their puzzle clubs. So then I started doing the puzzle clubs right away when there was just a few of us. And, the rest is history.
Are you all, what made you decide to help with the community building and organizing aspect of speed puzzling?
I'd say for me, I found that I was just given so much by being a part of this community, so I wanted to give something back. But I think in terms of joining the board, it's a really exciting inflection point for speed puzzling as the popularity of this activity grows, and we're getting some media attention, like in the Washington Post and New York Times and ESPN, and I think a lot of people are getting local features in their hometowns, so awareness is growing, and lots of people are watching the live streams. So I think it's an interesting point to assume a leadership role in the community because we can play a pretty meaningful part in helping maintain the warm and supportive culture of speed puzzling. So I'm interested in being a leader in the community to help maintain that. I think puzzling is a very wholesome activity, and it's available to everyone, and lots of people can get into speed puzzling. You can try to go fast even if you don't want to compete super seriously. So I just think it's an exciting point as this thing starts to really grow.
You mentioned being on ESPN. Are we calling this a sport? Are we leaning in? Are we sport puzzlers?
Yeah, there's a guy named Rob Shields who was doing the commentary at a puzzle competition in Portland a couple weekends ago, and his opinion was that there has to be special equipment or attire that's required for the activity to make it count as a sport. And I said, well, pointed to my puzzle T-shirt. He said, no, 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 it has to be like required for the activity. So we had a funny debate about that, but I will say I got a very funny text message from my father after Rose last year saying, I love you dearly, but I've got to say I never expected to see you like on a stage holding an American flag. This is right, Dad. I'm an athlete.
What's the joy you get from organizing? Obviously, it seems like it takes a lot of sacrifice. You have to pull yourself away from certain tournaments, and you have to spend a lot of time volunteering, right? What are the joys you get from this role?
I love to organize and I love to be in control of things. Like I was a really bossy kid when I was younger. I'm not bossy now. I love to just be involved in doing things. Like it's improving my life skills. Like that's something you should always be trying to do. You're trying to improve yourself, and these experiences are helping with that.
I think my instinct with any event planning is always just to jump in and help. I've had several jobs that involved or were centralized on event planning. And so when I see things happening behind the scenes, I always just say, what can I do to help? What do you need me to carry boxes? Like whatever it may be. And so that was how I got involved originally. It was just like knee jerk reaction. What do you need? But I think I like continuing with it because the people are so much fun. Like we have a blast as a board. And again, I think it's really interesting to think about things holistically. So in addition to all the nitty-gritty details of the events that we plan, we're also having very interesting high-level conversations about what kind of tone we want to set and where we want to see this activity grow. And that's very neat to be a part of. I remember when I went to Worlds for the first time last year, I was really struck by how when people were finishing their puzzle during the individual races, other competitors who were still racing would pause what they were doing and clap for them, even if it was someone from a different country they'd never met. Like everyone was stopping and applauding each other. And I can't think of a lot of other activities that have that kind of a caring mentality across nations. And I feel like the world could use a little more of that. So it's just exciting to be a part of, thinking about how we continue to keep it feeling that way.
Yeah, I think kindness of the community was something that we immediately recognized when we walked in. We love the fact that, people obviously want to do their best and they're competitive, but it isn't at the expense of anyone else. Everyone is really welcoming and supportive. I think that is a huge testament to sort of like the culture that everybody has contributed to, yourselves included, obviously, if you're organizers. I want to back up a little bit and, somebody listening to this who maybe read about you guys in the newspaper and they're curious, what is nationals? Like, Heather, why don't you tell me just about what are the actual speed puzzling events over the weekend?
Yeah. So an individual competition, you are given a 500-piece puzzle to complete. A pairs competition, you get a 500-piece puzzle, and there's 2 of you to complete. And the teams competition, there are 2 puzzles, 2,000-piece puzzles that you complete one after the next to finish. One controversial thing we did last year was in the pairs final, we had a 1,000-piece puzzle, which what made it controversial is that you had this very tiny table for 2 people to complete a 1,000-piece puzzle.
Okay, so we have a sense of for speed puzzling, there's individual, pairs, and teams. Then if you aren't speed puzzling, what other sort of events are happening?
Yeah. So if you are attending nationals but not competing, there were all sorts of other things that were involved in our convention pass. We had a wonderful, huge series of educational seminars on everything from puzzlegram influencing to getting your art on puzzles or starting your own company. We had a lot of vendors and sponsors who were present, and they had, demos of their things at their tables, and some of them were selling their puzzles. And it was some really interesting things, like the Puzzle Co. was there with puzzles that they have developed for people with visual impairment that have a sensory component to them. So there were a lot of really cool things. And then also upstairs in the convention room, we had a puzzle chess tournament. We had puzzle sprint competitions. And then there was also this massive 51,000 piece collaborative puzzle that everyone worked on throughout the weekend and finished, which was wild.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts of the weekend, to be honest. I think my jaw dropped when I saw it all laid out. It was really, really neat.
It was very cool to see because there would be probably 40 or 50 people at a time working on it on a couple of rows of tables. That was one of my favorite memories from Nationals, was just watching the wild, enormous puzzle. A lot of sky pieces.
It was such a memorable experience that I feel like every Nationals going forward will have to have this large puzzle.
We might have covered this one already, but how many people are on a team that compete in the team competition?
So it's teams of 4. Technically, you're allowed to have a team of 3, but you're at a little bit of a disadvantage if you choose to do so. So most people will have the full team of 4.
And for those that are familiar with speed puzzling, they probably already know the rules. But for somebody who's brand new, are there any intricacies or rules when you're competing?
Yeah, so there are some pretty typical rules across most events, and then we actually have guidelines that smaller organizations can use if they're, hosting their own competitions for the first time. And it's things like you can't use assistive tools or technology to solve the puzzle. So you can't, take a photo of the image with your phone and then enlarge different sections. You can't bring your own lights. Everyone has to have equal footing in the competition, even if that means you're all struggling with dark light. We do our best at JPA competitions to make sure that's not the case, but I have been to some other competitions where everyone's just struggling through it together. And then, it's really about level playing field. So everyone sees the puzzle for the first time together. So it's usually covered in an opaque bag before they say go. And then you take it out of the bag and everyone sees the image at the same time. If you get to the end of your puzzle and you can't find a missing piece, you are given a maximum penalty of 10 seconds while you look around for it. So even if it takes you 20 or 30 seconds to find that missing piece, you've just been given a 10-second penalty, which I think is lovely and gracious.
How often does that happen? Are pieces flying everywhere?
Yeah, I was going to say it's less common in individuals, but when you have 8 arms on a small table, it gets wild. Things get a little crazy.
It does. Fun to put puzzling and wild in the same sentence.
I'm sure for the first-time puzzlers, the nerves of ripping open the bag are going to exacerbate that problem.
My pair's partner cannot open the bag. She will make pieces fly everywhere, so I'm like the designated.
Yeah, you got to watch out for people who are bag rippers, because then the pieces fly out in that direction. Dangerous business. My problem was when I first got started, competitions still would leave the plastic on the puzzles, and now that's less common. Most of the time, the wholesale provider will remove the plastic in advance for us. But you're not allowed to have any extra tools at the table, and I don't have very long fingernails, so most people would run their fingernail along the side of the box to get the plastic off, and I would just be like gnawing on the corner trying to rip some of the plastic. And then someone taught me a move where you have to pretend this has plastic on it, but you hold the puzzle to your chest and then take your hands, and with friction you rip the plastic and just like rah, and get your puzzle. I always felt a little bit like a superhero when I would do that. It also doesn't always work. So when you do that move and then nothing happens, it's extremely disappointing.
Seems like there's little tricks and techniques even in the unboxing phase of the competition.
It's much skill involved.
Shifting a little bit, without naming names, what is your biggest pet peeve that happens during Nationals prep?
We all have day jobs.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think sometimes people don't realize that the 5 board members, we all do this on a volunteer basis in the evenings. So sometimes it takes us a little while to get to things because, we're checking the JPA email at midnight after a long day of work. Sorry, Heather, what were you going to say, love?
Well, personally, I remember nationals, like you can only control so much and something is going to go not how you anticipated. One of the biggest things for us with nationals in March, we had a shipment of puzzles that didn't arrive in time. So while like one of the competitions was happening, there was like a small group of us that were like unloading a truck of puzzles. So there was just so much extra going on that people maybe didn't see that just kind of added to the chaos of the entire event. And then you just went with it because we had no control over that.
I think the moral of the story of what I'm hearing is these people are organizers. Please be kind and patient. Everyone is doing their best and wants to put on a great event for you. So just be mindful of that. If you are reaching out and you have questions, they will get to you, but you may have to wait because, again, everyone here is a volunteer. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yes, and thank you.
You're welcome. We're going to take a beat and we're just going to pause the conversation. We'll be back after we highlight a member of the puzzle community. It might be someone you know. Take a listen, and we'll be back shortly with more great nuggets of wisdom from Heather and Becca. It's time for Meet the Puzzler. A huge part of why we wanted to start this podcast is because when we're filming, we often meet a lot of people but don't get the opportunity to get to know them. Today's puzzler is Crystal. She's been puzzling for 5 years, competing since last November, and she does around 3 to 5 puzzles per week. Welcome to the Puzzle People Pod, Crystal.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to join the podcast.
So I know that you're a graphic designer, and you mentioned that puzzling is a great break from screens. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I work for a supply chain automation company, and I'm constantly doing tons of different work every day. Like I could be working on a website, email marketing, social media. So I'm constantly like on my computer, on my phone. I also make reels for our Instagram and like YouTube shorts. So I'm constantly using a device all day long. So pretty much on screens all day. So at the really end of the day, the last thing I do is want to look at my phone. So really puzzling is a really good stress reliever for me, and just mentally it helps me decompress, helps me relax, get my mind off thinking about work because I don't need to be thinking about work after work. So puzzling just really makes it easier for me to just decompress, relax, and it also puzzling also helps with like my color recognition as a designer, so I can tell like how shades like differ, like from this pink, from this red. So it really helps me from a designer perspective too, just to make sure my color recognition is staying good. So by doing lots of puzzles, I get a lot of practice in that way.
So would you say that gradients are some of your favorite puzzles to do?
I do love gradients. I have a few of those in my collection. I have like some from Cloudberries that I can think of, Playgroup. So I have lots of different gradient puzzles. I've definitely done several, so those are really fun. Definitely anything that's like super colorful is something I love because it's really easy on the eyes, and it's easier to like sort the pieces. It's just when you can like sort a puzzle, it also helps me because then that's just something you can do with your hands. That's not looking at a phone.
You have a really fun Instagram. I was looking at it before we jumped on here, and you have an incredible puzzle collection, as a lot of people do who we've been chatting with. And I'm curious, what are your top like 3 puzzle brands that you love to do?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say my top 3 in no specific order. I definitely love random cut puzzles, so La Puz and Springbok. They're some of my favorites. And the third one, I'm gonna say Piecework, because you can maybe tell my shelf in the background a little bit. I just love their puzzles. I love the chunky 500 piece fit that they have, and there's just such beautiful packaging. So as a designer, the packaging is really important for me because it has to live on my shelves, has to be really nice and pretty, but also a good quality puzzle. So that's kind of what's important to me.
What, as a designer, I imagine you see a lot of images, and I'm curious if you ever think, oh, this would be good for a puzzle. Why not? And tell us a little bit about what you think makes a great looking puzzle.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot that plays into a really good image for a puzzle, and I'm seeing this more. Now that I've been doing puzzles more frequently, I could kind of see like what images I like and versus images I don't like because I've been trying to purge because I have over 700, and I can't. This I'm kind of at my limit, so I have to like go through them. I'm like, oh, this has been sitting on my shelf for 2 years. It's probably time to get rid of it. So a lot of those images that I really don't like are like some dark images, or it's just not a variety of colors, or maybe it's like a landscape image. I personally just don't like landscape images unless it's like a really nice illustration. But I definitely prefer like an illustration type of image, something that's more colorful. Like the puzzles in my background, if you can see it, there's just some of the really colorful puzzles just have so much variety and it's fun to like sort and do those. It's just I just love it when there's lots of variety of colors and patterns instead of just like a really dark. Just a-
So I know there's a huge difference between the kind of puzzle we like to do when we're at home and kind of like hanging out versus a puzzle you want to see in a competition. So what puzzle do you think is the best at a competition?
So I definitely think it's smaller piece counts. So I've actually done some speed puzzling with there's a small DC group in DC that does like some speed puzzling competitions. And they've done some like 300 pieces like for solo, and I think that's the best for like solo competitions. I think we've done some with masterpieces that I can think of off the top of my head. They have a really good 300-piece puzzle cut. Um Obviously I also love Ravensburger. Either the smaller 500-piece cut or the larger format. I like both of those. Those are really good for speed puzzling. Those probably my favorite um ones for speed puzzling that I can think of. But I don't really like to do anything that's more than 500 pieces because that just takes too long.
You said that you've gone to competitions and you also obviously have a presence online. In person in your area, what's around and what kind of puzzle events have you been going to or participating in?
So there's a few things in Baltimore. There's not too much going on. There's like some puzzle swaps occasionally, but they're not too like frequent or anything. They're like a couple times a year. So I've gone to those. And then in DC, there's some puzzle swaps as well, and there's speed puzzling events. And then outside of that, I've pretty much just flown to events and that kind of thing, like nationals I went to in San Diego. That was just really important to me to like speed puzzle like for the first time in a competition experience, and then also just meeting all of the people that like I've like friends on Instagram for like years. So that was really important to me. Another thing I went to was Puzzle Parlay, which is a wooden puzzle kind of event it's been hosted in like Rochester. So I went to that a few weekends ago. So I now am invested into wooden puzzles as well. So I've gone down that whole rabbit hole recently. So it's definitely a variety of stuff that's been going.
Well, on that note, thank you so much. Where can people find you online and get in touch with you if they want?
Yeah, so you can find me, Crystal Cotras. I'm on Instagram. You can follow me on Facebook. I kind of post the same stuff on there. Um, I try to post the same stuff on YouTube Shorts, and I also have a blog on Medium. I kind of try to write about all different kinds of content, like, or like, is my wish list puzzles for like the holiday season, or like, here are my favorite kind of puzzle attire, or my favorite puzzle accessories. So I write a lot of blogs, and I recently wrote one for Halloween puzzles. Um, so that's a great place to follow me on if you like to read puzzle content.
Perfect. Well, we'll also have a post which will share some of your links, and we appreciate you sharing. As I mentioned, we're new to this community, so if you or someone you know should be our Meet the Puzzler, let us know. Send us a message or DM on Puzzle People Doc, our Instagram. And if you don't have Instagram, you can send us an email at ben@chickenwingpictures.com. Thank you so much again, Crystal.
Thank you.
We're back with Heather and Becca, and I think one of the things we've been asking everybody is what kind of advice would you give to a first timer? This could be somebody who is interested but maybe a little intimidated as they've never done a speed puzzle event, or they're worried that, there's a lot of unknowns. So what kind of advice would you give to a first timer?
My biggest thing is, especially if it's your first time, just take it all in. Enjoy the experience. Don't put a lot of pressure on yourself because, I mean, some of us do like treat it as a sport, and it does get intense. But your first time out, make sure it's enjoyable. Make sure you're having fun and just enjoying meeting people. I'd say the majority people say the best part is the people, and then, doing the puzzles is like the bonus.
You talked a bit about the importance of fostering community and wanting to be part of that. Can you tell people a little bit what to expect? What is the etiquette of a JPA event or even just a puzzle event?
I thought of one right off the bat. A lot of people, when you come up to a table and people are puzzling, the first thing you should ask them, are you speeding? Are you timing yourself? And if you are, then you just like back away. But if they're not, then you can stay and talk and chat and, join in the fun. But with us speed puzzling, we're always trying to find like a small nook to go off and like practice for a minute or, an hour. So that would be an etiquette thing.
No, that's a great one. That's exactly what I'm talking about because that's something someone like myself would have no idea. And I would say, oh, look, there are people puzzling. And then I would accidentally ruin their time. And I didn't mean to do that. Becca, do you have anything you can think of?
I was smiling at Heather's example because that's actually happened to me. I was doing a race practice in the lobby of a hotel with my friend Andrea, and somebody sat down and started putting in pieces, and we were like, no! It was very funny. Yeah, I would say we try to make sure that people have the conditions they need to focus when they are racing. So there are rules around, like you can listen to music. It just has to be quiet enough that the people around you can't hear it, so they won't get distracted. And we try to cordon off the area where people are competing so that no one's bumping into their table or things like that. So I think it's just sort of common courtesy because it's an activity that a lot of people get into a real state of mental focus and flow on. So just doing what you can to respect whatever conditions they need to stay in the game.
If someone's interested on the helping you on the organizational side or getting involved in the JPA, what can they do and who can they reach out to?
Yeah, so we have a form available for folks who are interested in generally volunteering with the USA JPA. And then we also always put out a call for volunteers for specific events because we need sort of a small army of people who are helping us out on the floor at events. And then how I got started actually was just organizing my own local events. So you can find swap groups online and put together an in-person puzzle gathering or swap. That's what I did the first time, and I was shocked how many people came out, and we've since built a really lovely community in the Bay Area. And we also have a lot of our own members who are hosting local competitions, either as fundraisers or things in educational settings like schools or libraries. And we have some documents that can help people with suggestions on how to get started with hosting a competition, how to set things up, what your rules should be for your races, how to source puzzles, things like that.
If somebody wants to get that, you said is it on the JPA site? And can you tell us where they should go?
The how to host an event tips are on our site. I believe they might be hidden under the FAQ page, but I can look that up right now. And then the form for folks who are interested in volunteering has been sent out in our newsletters just to members.
Obviously, Nationals is a big event, and that may be a little intimidating for people. So I'm curious, you mentioned these smaller speed puzzle events or just events in the community. How do people find that? How could people maybe give speed puzzling a try nearby? What sort of resources do you all use to be able to tap into the local puzzle community?
We have a really good puzzling community here in Minnesota. We have Sarah Does Puzzles is doing a brewery contest every day of the week. And then we have our main ones, like we have an autism contest in the fall and the winter carnival in January. And we do have people that travel to that contest from other states. So if they want to try something that's not quite as competitive, but still super fun, maybe coming to the St. Paul Winter Carnival. But also, if you can't find local ones because they're not everywhere, there's online contests through speedpuzzling.com. You can do 4 or 5 contests a month just through speedpuzzling.com. They have lots of like bulk discounts. If you wanted to try something like that, it's not quite the same as in person, but the options are out there.
No, I think that's a great option for somebody who maybe, is a little socially anxious like myself and is a little worried about, putting yourself in that environment and also having to sort of perform and do a puzzle, not knowing where you would fit. So I think that's a great way for folks to sort of dip their toe in the pond without having to fully jump in.
Are there any upcoming puzzle events you're looking forward to, either to organize or to compete in?
World.
Yeah, we're both competing at the World Championship, which is in, I don't know, approximately 30 some days. Might even be less now.
Although when you hear this podcast, it will have been in the past. So hopefully you will have an amazing time at Worlds. I actually have a question about teams. I think for somebody who's new but maybe wants to have a team, do you facilitate that at all at something like nationals?
Well, that's what social media forums are perfect for. We have a Facebook group and we have a Facebook forum where people can go out and say, hey, I need a team, or I signed up, but I need some people, or I'm going, but I don't have a team. So people can definitely use social media to find a team. And then there is a way to go through the World site for World. So there are different options.
So you had asked about tips for newcomers. And the thing that I would add, in addition to Heather's sage advice, is to not measure yourself against others right away, but measure yourself against your own improvement. Because I think Heather and I are both really good examples of people who have crawled their way up. Like, we've both gotten exponentially better over time. So this is an activity that you can practice and get better. And like, instantly comparing yourself against the prodigies who can do puzzles extremely quickly will be really discouraging. But if you look at your incremental improvements and try out different strategies, it's actually, I have found, like, really neat. There's not a lot of other places as an adult where I can see myself like actually having evidence of having learned something new. So just track against yourself rather than others while you're getting started.
I think that's a great it's a great piece of advice. Especially, I mean, I will say this: I am not a speed puzzler. I'm just a puzzler in general, and I've noticed that I have gone, not on purpose, but it used to take me some time to put together a 500, and now I've been flying through them. So you definitely do improve, and it's fun to see that improvement. Are there any links for social media that you want to share before we say goodbye?
Yeah, our Instagram is at USA Jigsaw Puzzle. And then our Facebook, there's a group and there's also a community forum. And the community forum is it also at USA Jigsaw, or I think? But you'll find it very easily if you type in USA Jigsaw to a search field in Facebook. And there are, I think, over 5,000 people on that page. So you don't have to be a JPA member to be able to see information on that page and post yourself. And so that's also a place where lots of people will find each other. I think one of our most common posts is, hey, I'm new to this. Is there anything in the small town Ohio region? And then tons of people will respond. So that's a lovely way to get connected too.
If there are people who are getting into speed puzzling, but may not have the funds to buy hundreds of puzzles, do you have any suggestions for them?
I was one of those, and I created a swap. And now I get together with like 65 other people in the Bay Area a few times a year. And at our last one, we had over 500 puzzles change hands. And it's really nice. There's a very interesting like barter economy in the puzzling community.
I just want to add thrift stores. Like a lot of these Ravensburgers behind me are couple dollar thrift stores and garage sales. So they're out there. You just have to go look for them.
Yeah, and sometimes you might find thrift puzzles, perhaps you're afraid they will be missing pieces. For the purposes of race practice, it doesn't really matter unless it's missing in a just number of pieces. But if it's missing one or two, it's not going to impact your final time. So yeah, thrift store game is strong.
I'll also add that if you are on Instagram, I have seen a lot of people in the puzzle community. They'll sell puzzles too at a discount. So they'll say, hey, I'm getting rid of a ton of puzzles and then they'll show what it is and they'll be like, this one's $2, this one's $5, and I'll ship it to you. So I think that's also a great way to find some budget puzzles.
It's always funny when people do Instagram sales because we are all just selling to each other.
Thank you guys so much for coming on the Puzzle People Pod. This was really informative, and I think anyone who's excited or curious about doing a speed puzzle competition has a lot more information to make them comfortable and ready to go. So if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. You can find us on Instagram at PuzzlePeopleDoc.
And if you know someone who you think would make a great guest, please reach out to us at ben@chickenwingpictures.com.